Hi, everyone. I think, yep, I'm on. Cool. So, good afternoon. Hopefully everybody's not getting too sleepy as we're getting further along in the day. I wanted to talk for a little bit just about, the topic is how we can leverage games to help people learn. To give you a little bit of background on that, first maybe I'll tell you a little bit about ourselves and what we do. My company, Animoca Brands, is based in Hong Kong. And we're best known, I think, for working with licensed intellectual property because we work with a lot of brands from around the world. Some of these brands you may know. And we license those brands and create original games featuring those brands. So that's a strategy that we're very well known for. As you can tell from the range of brands up here, a lot of what we do in terms of demographic targeting has to do with family audiences, so children and families. So specifically today I wanted to talk about how we can sort of see the intersection between education and entertainment, because often when we're addressing family audiences, we have to keep both of those considerations in mind. We want to keep them engaged, but at the same time, for those of you who are parents out there, you'll well know that we're often looking for things that are educational for our kids and wish they'd stop playing all those damn games, right? So to think a little bit more about this intersection, okay? When I first started, playing games and everything, this term was coming of age, edutainment, and it's a terrible word. It's actually worse than synergy, in my opinion. But it was an 80s term that meant, obviously, education and entertainment and that space in between where they overlap on the Venn diagram. But I think that, unfortunately, this term has ended up, at least in English, with kind of a bad connotation because it's neither one nor the other, and it kind of leaves both audiences dissatisfied. And this term was joined not too long ago with another term we call gamification, right? Where everybody saw what we were doing in our industry and decided, hey, I want some of that action too. How am I going to add elements of competition and gameplay to my product or service to make it more engaging with users? So we have gamification. And these are all different ways in which we're trying to bring the elements of gaming and entertainment into other disciplines and other genres to try to find common ground. Okay? So I want to think about what does this finding of common ground look like when it's done correctly. And I'm going to use an example some of you might be able to relate to. We're going to turn back the clock a little bit. So this is how I learned how to type. I'm dating myself now. This is Typing Tutor 3. I had the DOS version myself. And in Typing Tutor 3, you learned how to touch type, and you played a game called Letter Invaders, right? So you're touch typing, you're not looking at your hands, even though you previously, like me, hunt and pecked everywhere when you typed. And you press the letter S to shoot the letters S's descending from the sky. And obviously this was based on one of the biggest hits at the time, Space Invaders. So for those of you 80s kids, you'll remember what I'm talking about. I think this is a perfect example because not only is it sort of the beginning of the genre, it shows where they took an idea of Space Invaders, which was a pure game experience, proven entertainment experience, and they then provided an educational, in this case Simon & Schuster, who's an educational publisher, provided an experience that taught you something that actually did exactly what the original game did. It was fun. When the letters come descending from the top of the screen, all you're thinking is how to shoot them down. You're not thinking about typing, right? So that's how, in the execution, I think they did a brilliant job with it because they actually totally made you forget that you're learning something. You're just playing a game. And the result was, after hours and hours of playing this game, I could type, right? It was like magic. So that, to me, is a perfect example of this intersection when it's done right. I'm now going to go through a couple of examples of stuff that we've done. So hopefully I can share some lessons that we've learned in our own business about trying to, achieve, scratch away at a little bit of the magic that I recall from my youth of learning how to type with Space Invaders. So let's look at an example of how somebody else in the market, and I honestly don't even know who this is. I found this on Google. A screenshot of somebody who is, another company who is trying to make math fun. Okay, so it says here, math match. Can you match the cards with the same value? Now honestly, this is boring, in my opinion. I think kids will find this boring. I think it smells a mile away like school, right? And so this is not a game. This is education, right? But it's trying to be packaged as if it's entertainment. And the thing that I think is that you can't put education in an entertainment wrapper because kids are too smart and they'll unpack it and they'll say, oh, there's education in there. I don't want any of this, right? So I think you have to try to approach it in a slightly different way. So when we thought about math and entertainment, we thought, what do kids like, right? Kids like endless runners. Endless runners is a timeless genre for kids. All kids like endless runners, right? And there's math, okay? So how do we mix endless runners and math? I give you Math Run, okay? But what we wanted to do with Math Run was not to keep it too mathy, if you know what I mean. So here we have an endless runner, and it actually began life, here's a little sort of in-house secret, it began life as an endless runner. So we had an endless runner. And what did we do with that endless runner? We decided to replace the IAP monetization system with math. So here you have a screen where you can see when you're running, you crash into the wall, you die, pop up, right? This was the place that you used to get your offer wall or buy more coins or something like that. Instead, we have math problems. So if you want to keep playing, you have to solve simple math problems, and you have to solve a sequence of math problems. It's a very simple trick, and actually, we kept the game and the whole game structure, the game format, the same. It's still a game. We just replaced the IAP monetization, okay? On top of that, we added missions, so you can have achievements. But in the case of education, achievements are report cards. And this can then be shared with teachers, shared with parents, to show how you're doing in your math progress, right? And this is no different than the parent who says, do some homework for an hour and then you can watch TV. Do a math problem, then you can get another life and go back to playing the game you like. So it's a model of sort of supply and demand that has been working for generations in educating kids. And what we wanted to do was be careful not to pollute the game experience as a reward for the educational experience, okay? By the way, that particular game is very popular with teachers, which is something that we discovered by accident as we were getting into this genre. As you can see, the reviews are very strongly positive for this. To our surprise, this was one of those things, like many of you will appreciate in the games business, this was an accidental success. We were experimenting with lots of different things, and we noticed huge download volume in September every year. And we thought, what's going on? This is an old game. Why is everybody downloading it in September? Because teachers were promoting it to students, right? So we have a lot of positive reviews, but as always, don't read all the comments because some people you'll never be able to please, right? Because, you know, math. So let me give you one more example. How do you teach people to code without them realizing that they're coding? Here's a game called Toy Attack, which we launched earlier this season, I should say. Now it's last year, end of last year. And it's a robot battle game featuring toys that are cute. So it's fighting with cute things, right? All the things the internet loves. And what did we do with the Toy Attack and robots battling? We created a coding language to replicate, you know, obviously coding as you all know it, using if-then statements, because we wanted people to program their robots so that then the robots would go into battle and act according to basically the AI that you've programmed into them, right? We wanted people to think about it. Actually, this is no different than thinking about chess strategy 10 moves in advance, in another way of thinking about it. So when you're actually in the middle of your battle, you will see that, you know, as damage is created on your character, or as your character, you know, will retreat because you told him, hey, once you get hit twice in the head, you got to retreat, et cetera, et cetera. I think the proof of the success of this is that the average session time across the entire game and lifetime of the game is 20 minutes. So people are clearly feeling engaged in this because for them the fun is programming it, and I think it taps into that sort of creative builder curiosity, because let me program it and see how it battles this time, and then if that doesn't work, let me program it a different way and see what happens. So I think we've tapped into that fun and that curiosity. And again, this is not about education, meaning you don't seek this out because you're trying to educate yourself. Education is the result from playing something fun. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about something that's been in the press very recently. So I think Nintendo is actually tapping into the same spirit of what we're talking about, and obviously we're not the only people doing this, so it's not like Nintendo's copying us. But I think this is also a way in which we can think about the intersection of gaming and creativity and education. And it's one of the reasons that, you know, when I first saw this, I thought this is a fantastic idea. Fantastic, in my opinion. And also, I just spent a whole Christmas season watching lots of kids unwrapping Switches and playing with them and interacting with them. But for those of you who don't know, it's basically a set of die-cut cardboard, and the cardboard cutouts, you assemble them together and they create all kinds of different controllers for your Nintendo Switch. You can insert the joypads of the Switch into the cardboard in different ways so they act as sensors. So you can create a piano, a fishing rod, you know, a throttle for a car. And this taps into a lot of what Nintendo learned with the Wii platform and how humans interact in physical space with electronic devices. But I think most of all, it, you know, appeals to people in that maker sense because it's the same reason we love playing with Legos and using our imaginations to create something. Nintendo's gone a little bit of a sort of template way in that these are all supposed to make a certain object. It's not completely sandbox, but it does extend the life of your console device into physical space in a very novel way. And most importantly, I think, in a way that brings families together and allows kids to play with their parents and create together. And that is actually the heart of what education is. So without realizing it, or maybe very intentionally, I think Nintendo is actually creating a platform which is very education-oriented because of the way it encourages that creative collaboration in physical space. So that's all I have for you. Thank you very much, and if you have questions. Or I think there's a microphone coming around.
Oh, so what's your revenue model for these apps, the educational ones?
Good question. So it completely depends. On the one hand, it can be from IAP, so something like Toy Attack, which you saw earlier, comes from IAP and selling items within the games so that you have additional features, additional robots, additional characters. With something like Math Run, that's actually done on a premium and a subscription basis, because the focus of something like Math Run is actually for the education market and for teachers, so it's more subscription based. Were there other questions?
So you started with this example of a shooter with letters.
Yes.
Coming down, yeah, to learn typing. So, and you described it as you got really engaged in it.
Yes.
And you even so much that you forgot that these were actually letters.
Yes.
Do you ever experience that as a risk, that it somehow becomes too engaging, so that you kind of miss what you were going for in the beginning in terms of education?
I don't think so, because in the case of that particular game, it's trying to teach you touch typing. So what it's trying to teach you is stop looking at your hands. Just focus on the screen and let your hands follow naturally. I had the same problem when I was failing at trying to learn how to play the guitar and the piano when I was younger, because I'm always looking at my hands and not looking at the music, right? So I think in that case, the game actually succeeds in the fact that you're obsessively, or I was obsessively focused on the game, because that means my hands are starting to learn naturally what they're supposed to be doing. So I actually think it's a positive in that case.
So it's actually good to take away the meaning of the letters.
Yes.
It was only typing.
Because the thing was, when I first started out, I thought, I'm a reasonably fast typer. I was typing like a lot of people start typing at first. And I could do it quickly, and I was in university, and I needed to get things done, and I thought, I can't be bothered to spend the time to learn how to touch type. But I know it will be good for me. So because in the long run, it will save me time. Thank God I did it, right? Now, 20, 30 years later. But as I was doing it, I had to force myself. It was a bit like exercise or any other kind of education. I didn't want to do it at first. But the game helped keep me engaged and made it more fun and interesting so that I progressed in my lessons. Because the better I did in my lessons, the better I got in the game, and the game was helping me to practice my lessons. We've actually, and I apologize, I should have shown it. We actually have another game that we've done along those lines, something called Monster Chords. And it's a game where we teach the guitar and the ukulele, but we do it in a way where we use a chord recognition algorithm that listens from the tablet or the smartphone to your guitar. And you are basically playing a game on screen, but the way that you use the controller is playing notes on the guitar. So I think it's the same kind of idea.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, Jesse Koff. What measures have you taken in terms of primary research, initial feedback from young children playing the games? Have you been to schools, daycare centers? And also, what is the age range in terms of the demographic of your users? Are we talking up to 6, 7 years old or even higher?
Okay, so when we started out, we exploited our own children, which is what most developers who have their own kids do. So we tested home first, and then we experimented with a bunch of different ideas. As we evolved it into a part of our business, then we started to do a more sort of programmatic test. So we started with local schools, and now it's to the extent that we actually have co-founded a school in our office park where we are now, which is a primary school that uses technology as a big part of its learning experience. But yes, we work with kids. The ages of kids tend to be anywhere. If you are looking at products like these, they're usually anywhere up to age 7. We find that's the sweet spot for what we do, because up to age 7 or 8, in most Western countries particularly, there's a very strong emphasis on play as a part of education, and that creative play is seen as education. In Asia, that's different, but in Western countries, that still works. And so that's a great sweet spot for us, because we don't have to be strictly curriculum-based to be providing providing something that parents perceive as being educational.
But have you kind of approached local schools or local curriculums to get this type of gamification involved in the official curriculum of those schools? Or?
Okay, so what we do is we work with teachers who consult on the game design and on what kind of content that we have in the game. And we'll work with teachers depending on markets that we're targeting. So often we'll work with American teachers because the US is a very large market, for example. And then we will refine the product based on working with teachers from those places. But most of the time, it'll be based on feedback from the actual users. So something like Math Run was evolved over an almost 3-year process of just iterating and iterating based on feedback from teachers. Like feedback, everything from typical comments section of the App Store feedback to direct feedback.
Thank you.